Hi, this is Mike from Mike's Unboxing Reviews and How To, and on today's video we're going to show you how to install Windows 10 on your Windows-based PC. Very straightforward, very easy to do, but you do have to do it in a methodical way, otherwise you are going to experience problems. So in today's video we're going to go through installing a new M.2 drive into our Windows PC. We're going to go through the entire process of downloading Windows onto our USB flash drive, then installing it, going through BIOS settings, etc., and then going through showing how to configure Windows, when you should do updates, when you shouldn't, and when to install your device drivers. So keep watching to find out more. So what items are you going to need to actually perform this process? So obviously you're going to need a couple of things. So one of which is your pre-built computer. Also, you will need a working computer which can connect to the internet, such as the one behind me. You'll also need a USB stick to put Windows 10 onto. Now this drive is a 32 gig drive, but you can use anything which is 8 gigs or larger. You will also need, obviously, a replacement drive. So we've gone from using this is our OCZ ARC 100, which is basically old enough to be out of the ARC, but sadly has failed, so that does need replacing. We could, if we wanted to, go with another SATA SSD in this machine. There are 2 slots available, but I thought being that we are going to the modern era of computing, then heck, why not use an M.2 drive such as this one? This is actually an M.2 SSD, which uses the older SATA methods. You can, of course, get these M.2 drives in the NVMe status, which uses PCI Express. The choice is essentially going to be down to you. If you're not entirely sure what drive you need for your computer and you want to perform this process, then feel free to reach out to us at the email address in the video description. Also, we do have a Discord chat server, so if there's anything you want to know and you want to know really quickly, drop us a line on Discord and we can get back to you as soon as we can. So we've got all the components we need. We've got a working PC behind us, so let's go over to that now. We'll download with Windows 10 using the Windows Media Creation tool, and we'll get started on our drive. So the first thing we're going to need to do is to head over to the Windows 10 Creation Tool site, or Media Creation Tool site. There will be links in the video description, but you can go to Microsoft.com, en-gb, software-download, Windows 10. Again, links will be in the video description. So you get a couple of options here. If you've already built your PC and you've got Windows on it and you just want to update, then you can click on Update Now. But if you want to download it onto a USB stick or create some installation media, then we can click here to download the tool. So let's go ahead and click on Download Tool now and choose where we want to save it to. So let's save it to our desktop. Now this tool, you can't just put it onto the USB stick and that is it. A lot of people do make that mistake, unfortunately. It isn't quite that simple. There is a few more steps needed, so yeah, don't just download the tool onto your USB stick and chuck it in your PC. It ain't gonna work. So once we've got this downloaded onto our desktop, we can double click on it and you'll come up with the user account control, which you probably can't see at the moment because we're recording this in OBS, but it'll go through and start getting Windows 10 set up ready. Now don't panic, this isn't going to affect your PC that you're actually on at the moment. This is just going to be trying to create our USB flash drive. So just be patient, let it get things ready and wait for the next prompt. First of all, you have to agree to the terms and conditions of the license, etc. So the next part is what do you want to do? So you've got the option to upgrade this PC now. Well, we don't want to do this, but obviously if you're having problems with your PC, then you can go ahead and do that. So this is what we want to do. Create installation media, USB flash drive, a DVD or an ISO file for another PC. So click on the radio button there and then click on Next. And then we get some options on the language, the architecture and the edition. Now if you're not entirely sure, then you're probably best off just going with Windows 10 and get the professional, the 64-bit version. Very rarely we need anything other than that. There is a tick box here, says use the recommended options for this PC. So obviously if it's not the PC you're doing it on, then you can go through and make changes there. You can have 32-bit, 64-bit or both. Generally most PCs are going to be 64-bit these days. Language, obviously you can choose your own specific language. I'm going to be going ahead and choosing English because believe it or not, that is what I try to speak on a general daily basis. So yeah, let's give that a go. So next we have to choose which media we want to use. Now at this point, it's a good idea to have your USB drive installed in the PC and preferably only that one. If you've got other removable media, it's probably a good idea to remove those now just in case they get confused. Or alternately, if you're burning a ISO file or a DVD, then you can choose the ISO file version, but we're going to use the USB flash drive and it does say there it needs to be at least 8 gigs, so make sure your drive is 8 gigs or more. Once you're happy, click on Next. and we get to choose a USB flash drive. Now I've only got one installed on mine at the moment, which is the D drive, so yeah, that's absolutely fine. So we'll click on next, and again it's going to be getting a few things ready, so just be patient. The progress now, the meter will go through up to 100% downloading the file, then it'll be creating the actual USB stick. This can take a little while, so my suggestion would be to if you want to, keep an eye on it, but you can go off and do other things. There doesn't really need to be any user intervention for quite a while now, so we'll fast forward through that, and yeah, hopefully your experience is much quicker as well. Okay, so there we go, we've got to 100% and it says now your USB flash drive is ready, and what we need to do is click on finish, and it'll do some minor housework after, removing some temporary files, etc. So that is it. We can now remove the media creation tool if we want to from the desktop, and also we can take out our drive from the computer. So if we just take a quick look at our D drive, so this is the new drive which is being created, and if we double click on it, you should find inside of there is a setup application, boot manager.efi, auto run, and all these other files. So just make sure, quickly have a quick visual, make sure that all those files exist on your flash drive, and you should be ready to go. So now we're going to take the drive out and get the PC ready for installation. Okay, so we've got our system set up and waiting, and I'm recording this from OBS on the screen there, and also I've got a monitor here. So this is the computer all set up. What we're going to need to do first of all is obviously plug in our USB drive. Now I've plugged that into the back where I showed you a little bit earlier, into those USB ports. Go for the blue ones, the faster ports if you possibly can, otherwise, well, Windows will just take longer to install. But obviously if you've only got USB 2 ports available, then you have to make do with what you've actually got. So what we're going to want to do is to fire up your computer. The best thing to do is to probably go into the BIOS straight away. So tap the delete key a few times until you get the BIOS screen. Or if you already know, if you've read the manual, look for whichever key is for your boot options. Now for this particular motherboard, this is an ASRock B550M ITX-AC. For this one, we just need to press the F11 key, which brings up our boot menu, which as you can see on the screen right now, has got our different drives. So it's got Windows Boot Manager for the Intenso SSD, which sadly already has an operating system on, so we're going to need to erase that. And we've also got our UEFI Kingston Data Traveler, and that is the one we're going to select. So choose that one and then press enter, and then it will try and boot from that USB drive. The system's rebooted now, so now we should start seeing the spinning wheel as Windows starts up. So this is the first screen for setting up Windows, so go ahead and choose your language, your time and currency format, and also your keyboard method. Now we're United Kingdom, so I'm going to go ahead and choose United Kingdom for all of those, so click next. And then we've got the options for repair a computer or install now. So let's choose install now, and it should come up saying setup is starting. At this point now, it's asking for your Windows key. If you've got your Windows key already, then great, you can go ahead and type that in straight away. If you don't have a Windows key, you can always head over to premiumcdkeys.com/Mike's Unboxing, and if you use the discount code Mike's Unboxing, then you'll get a few % off of the already amazingly low price. Again, all of this will be in the video show notes below, so you can click on the links from there. If for some reason you don't have a Windows key, or you think that perhaps the system already has a kind of key attached to the BIOS, which a lot of them will do these days, then you can just go ahead and click on I don't have a product key. Once you've done that, you'll be greeted with a list of operating systems. Now obviously choose the one that you have a license key for, or the one that you plan to use with your new license key when you get it. So we're going to choose Windows 10 Pro and hit next. At this point now, we have to agree to the terms and conditions of the licensing, and we get the option for upgrade or custom install. So we're going to choose custom, and as you can see on the screen there, so we've got all of our drive partitions. So what I'm going to do is just go ahead and delete all those partitions, leaving us with one whole allocated space, or unallocated space rather. So if you've obviously got more than one drive connected, make sure you're doing the right one, but ours is just going to be drive 0. So at the moment we've got 476.9 gigabytes free, which is about right for a 500 gig drive. So when you're happy, just click on next. And now the installation process will start. So it'll start copying the files from your USB stick into memory, then it'll get the files ready for installation, and we'll probably experience a couple of system reboots. But essentially for now, that is all we need to do. Just be patient, let it go ahead and do its thing. At some point it'll get to the point where it says Windows needs to restart to continue. At this point you can, if you want to, you can actually remove your USB drive, which I'm going to take out now. Obviously, depending on your boot methods or boot options, it may just disregard the Windows 10 disk the next time round. That is entirely down to you, but you can, if you want to, take it out at this point. When Windows is getting ready, you'll see some information on the bottom of the screen saying it's installing devices, etc., that kind of thing, getting ready. There'll possibly be another couple of reboots depending on your system configuration, but again, just let it do its thing. So the next part of the installation is choosing your setup. So if you're in an organization or you need to connect to a domain, click the bottom one. If it's just for regular household use or on a work group, then you can choose the top one, so for personal use, and hit next. And this part is probably a little bit controversial. So if you want to add your Microsoft account at this point, you certainly can do. Those of you that don't want Microsoft kind of clawing into everything you do, then you may want to not do that. So if you want, you can choose an offline account, which is down here in the bottom left-hand corner, or you can put in your Microsoft account details. So for this particular instance, I'm actually going to go with an offline account, and you will get nagged about not getting the full experience. So we'll go with a limited experience on this one. Obviously, if you choose the other option, you'll get things like OneDrive and all those kinds of things set up to begin with. Also as well, if you've got a license key tied to your Microsoft account, then potentially those things can transfer over as well. So it's one of those things where it is down to the individual. For ease of use and simplicity in this particular instance, I've gone with just the offline account. But obviously, if you want to do the online version, you're more than welcome to. As you can see there in the background, it looks like the graphics driver have updated, so we'll go ahead and carry on with the rest of this. So now you have to put a name of who's going to use the PC, so we'll just put new and click next. At this point you can choose a password should you wish to. We're not going to bother with that for this instance. Obviously, for your own PC, I would suggest you do use a particularly strong password. Now we get the Microsoft, the clause in the game, so most of you are going to want to click no for most of this stuff, but do read it and obviously make sure that you understand what it is you're doing about diagnostic data, etc. Most of this you can pretty much get away with saying no to. And more nagging about letting Cortana help, and we'll say not now. Obviously, if you want to use Cortana, click on yes and you can go ahead and set up Cortana. Essentially that is pretty much it, so we can just let Windows carry on doing the final setup, and we'll be back as soon as it's ready. Okay, so Windows is fully installed now. Well, at least as much as we can do from our Windows USB key. So now is really how to set up Windows. Now, from a lot of you, you're probably thinking you want to get straight away in and start installing things like Steam, Epic Games, Fortnite, all your favorite stuff. But don't. Wait just there. Don't do anything. Just let Windows carry on doing its own thing. Drivers and updates and things like that are still happening in the background. Even though Windows looks like it's loaded, it hasn't. And you'll probably find if we go into Device Manager, so we'll right click here, and even still you can tell it's still doing something because it's actually taking a little while to do things. So we go into Device Manager and we'll notice everything appears to be okay. So we've got no exclamation marks. So as far as that's concerned, we're doing okay. But what I would certainly suggest to do, the first thing to do, make sure you've got your connectivity and head straight into the settings cog and go into update and security. Check for updates. Now you may find because we've been connected to the internet straight away that there may not be anything initially, but yeah, as you can see, it's already popped up on the screen. There's an absolute ton of updates to do, and also a quality update. So be patient, do the Windows updates first of all, because they're going to make sure that all your system files and anything which might be a vulnerability in the system will be patched, or at least as best it can do. So we're going to go ahead now and do all of the Windows updates. When it's done, we'll do a quick reboot, go back in again and see if there's any more updates and any other things that we need to update. Then we can go ahead and look at device drivers. Okay, so we've done a few Windows updates, rebooted a couple of times, and it seems that we're now ready. So click on the start bar again, go to the settings cog, update and security, and check for updates. And it appears we're good. But what we do have is view optional updates. So in view optional updates, we've got some driver updates here. So we've got our AMD drivers, media system, etc., etc. I would suggest not doing them from here at present. So what we're going to do is we're going to open up a browser, And we're going to go to amd.com and we're going to choose the drivers and support page. And this is the best way of doing it. So if you're on a AMD system, obviously this is what you should be doing. If you're on an Intel based system, you've got an Intel processor, then you should go to the Intel website, so intel.com or amd.com. If you've got a NVIDIA graphics card, that is what we do later on. Don't do that straight away. First of all, we want to do the chipset drivers and the processor drivers for our systems. So again, Intel or AMD. And then once all that's done and we've done a reboot, then we can go ahead and start looking at graphics card drivers. Now, if you're on an AMD system and you've got an AMD graphics card also, then you're completely covered. AMD's one-click install or their auto detect driver will actually do everything you need to do in a logical fashion. So you don't have to go and get the chipset drivers, then the processor drivers, and the graphics drivers. You can just go ahead and do the auto detect and install, and it will do it all for you. So let's click on download now, and we'll get this started. And we'll choose open when it's done. So then we get the Radeon software installer. Just let it install to its default location. And this will start up the AMD software installer. So what it's going to do first of all, it's going to scan your system to see what's actually on your machine and then see what drivers are actually recommended for it. So now it's coming up saying it's recommending the AMD Vega 3 graphics software and the recommended install, and we've got some additional options there so you can do a full install, etc. I would leave all of this exactly as it is, just let it carry on do its thing. So we're going to click on next, and it's also going to install all the chipset drivers and parts of the processor which actually make a massive amount of difference. So don't just install a graphics driver and expect everything to work as it should do. The whole system is built on various different little platforms which all build up. So if any of those tinier, smaller platforms aren't stable enough, the whole system crumbles and falls down. So make sure you get all the individual drivers. So on this one, we've got our Ryzen power plan, we've got our GPIO driver, we've got our SM bus driver, our GPIO driver, and our PSP driver. We do need all those, so we're going to click on install. So it'll go now and install all those drivers first of all, then it will reboot the system. Then we can install safely the AMD graphics driver, which is built in to this particular processor, which is the 3000G with Vega 3 graphics. So let it do its thing. Again, don't touch anything, don't do anything. Don't be installing Steam or Epic or anything else like that in the background. Just be patient, let it do its thing. It's far, far more beneficial to do things in a steady, logical progression rather than just flooding the system with information and things getting misplaced or in the wrong order, and it will make your system unstable. So just be patient, let it do its thing, and we'll be back when it's ready for some more input. So now we've got an information window come up saying that our system is going to restart in a minute or so we can speed things up by clicking on restart now. Again, just be patient, let it do its thing. So now the system's rebooted, so now it's going to carry on with the AMD Radeon software installer. Again, I know I keep on saying it, but be patient, let it do its thing. So now it's finished, we can go ahead and click on restart again. There will be a lot of restarts in this particular process, so yeah, get used to it. So now the system's rebooted, and that is the chipset drivers, and fortunately for us in this particular instance it is the VGA drivers or the graphics card drivers as well. If you're using a system which has got maybe a mixture, so you've got AMD processor, NVIDIA graphics card, or Intel processor, NVIDIA graphics card, etc, etc, the graphics card is the one you do the last. So make sure you get all of the chipset components and Windows updates done first, then do your graphics card drivers. A lot of people will get a system, install Windows, maybe even a slightly older version of Windows, then the first thing they'll do is, right, NVIDIA graphics card or AMD graphics card, and they'll just flood the system with the latest AMD driver. Now the drivers for AMD and NVIDIA generally are related to the specific version of Windows which is current at the time. So they do have this kind of checksum type thing, so they see if they're actually matching, which is why quite a lot of people, when they install their system, they'll get maybe the error 43 code or some other random error in either AMD or NVIDIA graphics cards. And that's because the system just doesn't know what is going on. It hasn't got the foundations ready, it hasn't got the chipset drivers installed, or it's basically just a driver mismatch. So don't go ahead and just flood the system with the latest graphics card drivers straight from the get-go, because there's an extremely high chance that it isn't going to work. And it's actually very difficult to remove all that kind of stuff. But if you do get into that kind of fix, we have done a video on how to use DDU, or display driver uninstaller, which you can check out up here. You may find that extremely beneficial if you don't want to do a complete uninstall of your system and then rebuild from scratch. So again, now we're done chipset driver wise. Now we would normally install our NVIDIA graphics card drivers, so nvidia.com or amd.com for AMD graphics cards, etc, etc. Your system at this point is pretty much good to go. So now you can do things like install Steam, maybe install Chrome, do any other things like that you wish to, if something you use on a regular basis. Obviously things like Office 365, you can go ahead and do all that stuff now. I would suggest not doing any of that stuff until you've got your system drivers installed and the system is seemingly very stable. Now, a couple of ways to keep your system stable. Currently at the moment, there are things like the Hive Nightmare and also the Print Nightmare. So really you could go in to your services section and disable your print spooler. That's probably a good idea. If you don't use a printer on your system, it's just a standalone system, you're not printing, then it's probably a good idea to disable the print spooler anyway. Another thing you can do is to actually disable System Restore. System Restore runs in the background what they call shadow volume copy. So basically your system is always kind of preparing a backup system, which then gets put into your System Restore files. Now there is a vulnerability in that at the moment as well. So certainly you could go ahead and do that if you wanted to. So again, both of those things, good things to disable, both of which there's links up here, and they'll be in the video description, so you can check those out, how to do those individual things. Another thing I would suggest doing at this point is actually try and benchmark your system or get some kind of readouts to make sure that everything is behaving as it should do. If the system's stable, then there's a pretty much good chance that the system is A-OK anyway. But for me personally, there's 3 tools which I generally tend to like to install just to get an idea of what is going on with the system. So one of which is CPU-Z's CPU-Z, the other one is Hardware Monitor, and also as well Cinebench is always a really good one to do. Now actually, when it comes down to Cinebench, what you can do, because Windows does rely quite heavily on the Windows Store in the background, you can open up your Windows Store, or the Microsoft Store as it's now known, click on the 3 dots there and click on Downloads and Updates. You'll probably find there's quite a few, and yeah, if you click on Get Updates, yep, so after a little bit of a kick in the nuts, it's decided to actually do it. So there's 34 applications and programs and background processes which rely on the Windows Store and components of it to actually work. So even though you've done all your Windows updates, the store updates will also need doing as well. So we won't go and install anything from the store quite yet. So we'll go over to the CPU-Z and we'll get that first of all. So from the CPUID.com website, there's 2 pieces of software that I'd like to use. So we'll get the CPU-Z first of all, we'll get the setup in English. And also if we go into software, we've got Hardware Monitor as well. Obviously there are other programs you can get. I just like to use these, they've always worked very well for me. And we'll go ahead and install CPU-Z. Just select all the defaults there. And we'll do the same for Hardware Monitor. And we can close down all that, that's all done now. And we'll minimize that. So you'll have 2 icons on your desktop, CPU-Z, so let's go into that one first of all. And this will basically give you information about your system, your RAM speeds, etc, etc. So it gives you a readout there, processor, everything looks to be okay, core speeds are okay. This is a good chance that you'll find if there's anything wrong with your system, maybe you put your cooler on incorrectly, you may find some weird things happening with your CPU core speed. So from here visually you can find out if there is something bizarre going on, so you can check out things. You've got caches, your main board information, so if you need to do any BIOS updates you can get information of what BIOS you're on, etc. Memory wise it tells you what speed you're running at. Now this is 3000G, so we can't really get the most out of our RAM, but it is running at DDR4 3200, which is absolutely fine. All your speed, etc, graphics, and there's a benchmark tool as well, so you can actually do a quick benchmark if you want to in CPU-Z if you want. Hardware Monitor, also really good program for monitoring. Again, if you haven't installed your CPU cooler properly, you can see this on here. So you've got things like your CPU vCore, your DRAM speeds, etc, etc, all the temperatures. So our south bridge and main board 41 degrees, 40 degrees, CPU's 52. And for this tiny little cooler, I think that's absolutely fine. So nothing out of the ordinary there. All looks absolutely fine. So again, handy little tools just so you can keep an eye on things and look out for certain voltages if they're spiking or anything. Also keep an eye on fan speed, so if there's a fan which doesn't appear to be working properly, you can see what speed it's running at. But yeah, handy little piece of software. I use it on a very regular basis just for keeping an eye on temperatures. Obviously, if you've got your own personal preference, please go ahead and use that. This is just my own personal preference, and it works very well for me, and it doesn't cost anything, which is always a good thing. So anyway, that is CPU ID, CPU Z, and CPU ID hardware monitor. And let's see if the Windows Store is finished doing what it was doing in the downloads. Yeah, it appears that is all done. So what you can do if you want to, you could click on search and type in Cinebench, and you can get the Cinebench app. Again, a lot of people will say, well, no, you should get it from the Cinebench store, etc., or from their own site. Entirely up to you. This, for me, just works very easily. Just click on install, go through the Microsoft Palaver, so you can close that down, and it'll still go ahead and install it. So then you can do your Cinebench runs, get some idea of where your CPU stands with your system, do a single core and a multi-core. That will give you a really good representation. At this point, before you've thrown a load of software on there, you can check your Cinebench scores against known good scores from somewhere like CPU Monkey, etc., and compare. And if yours is within kind of the normal ranges, then you know that everything is pretty much working as intended. If you get any strange anomalies, like you're getting a really low score, then you can look further into diagnostics. At this point, it's brilliant because we don't have a system flooded with things like your Steam library and Epic installers and all the stuff I said before, Fortnite, all your games, etc. This is pretty much a base installation, so it's a really good time to actually do your benchmarking early on, just to look for any potential weaknesses or any configuration issues. Okay, so there we go. Sadly, obviously it was quite a long video. I'll try and cut out as much as I possibly can that is not relevant or not very interesting. That may not be that easy to do, but anyway. This is one of those things which ideally you want to get used to doing. So have a methodology of installing Windows, going through, doing things like your fine-tuning, installing your updates and drivers in the correct and logical order. Otherwise you can and will get problems. Once you've also done all this, I would suggest very strongly getting a piece of software such as Macrium, we've done videos on that up here, and do a backup of your system. Make a backup image, so should anything go wrong, at least you've got a backup image. You can, of course, if you want to, use System Restore, although potentially it's not the best piece of software. It gets the job done, but certainly for me personally, something like Macrium, backup to a USB drive or to a NAS, is a really, really good solution. And if you want to, you can set up so it does on a daily basis, which I do on my production machine. So things like that, backups and maintenance, really worth getting into the habit of doing. But I think that's going to be pretty much it. So hopefully now you've learned how to install Windows in a logical order, and also when to do your Windows updates, when to install your drivers and all that kind of stuff. If the video has been helpful to you, don't forget to give the video a thumbs up. And if there's any comments or questions, feel free to let us know in the comment section below. If you're getting any problems with your system installing Windows and you need a little bit of help or a little bit of hand-holding, please do join us over on our Discord chat. And we do actually have a pretty decent rate of success on there. So yeah, if you are having problems, please feel free to come over and join us. But that's going to wrap this one up. I've been Mike. This is Mike's Unboxing Reviews and How To, and hopefully we'll catch you in the very next video. Thanks for watching.